We'll go ahead and begin with roll call.
Great. Zan Ojro,
Present.
Eric Cardella, Parasa Chamrami, Yoselin De La Garza.
Present.
Okay, great. I was gonna say, if you're online, please unmute and say you're present. Jenny Glass, Janine Hartley,
Here.
Celeste Jansen.
Here online.
Thank you, Celeste. Robin Johnson, Sam Coe, Kim Lett,
Here.
Andy Leonard,
Here.
Tabidi Lewis, Adrian Livingston, Christina McMahon, she will be, Maricela Ortega Guzman.
Here.
Jeff Parker.
Here.
Carlos Rodriguez. Molly Rogers.
I'm here on video.
Thank you. Diana Rojas. Santana May. Janelle Theobald.
Yeah.
Liz Thorne. TV Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have no vote scheduled for this meeting. We do not need a quorum. Just a reminder, please state your name before you speak. This meeting is being recorded. This is a formal advisory meeting of the state. If you are a member of the public and wish to make a comment, there's a public comment section for the, there's a public comment section at the end of our agenda, and each member of the public will have 3 minutes. To speak per person. And then, yeah, just to go over the agenda, pretty quickly. It looks like we're gonna start with an icebreaker at 10:10, so right now, and then we'll go into future ready Oregon presentation at 10:30, at 11, request for application update, at 11:15, strategic planning update, 11:35, YBC committee update. We'll take a short break. And we will, at noon, we'll start with the state advisory juvenile justice committee updates. And then public comment will be at 12:40. And then. Oh. Oh, yes. Okay, so we'll do a meeting roundup and discussion. Yeah, and then we'll adjourn. So we'll go ahead and get started.
All right, thanks everybody. Brian Bettman, Youth Development Division Director, record. Appreciate everybody being here. Thanks for driving however far it is that you had to drive some closer than others. Zan is very happy. This round the corner, maybe-ish.
Yeah, not far.
Not far. And yeah, again, just appreciate everybody being here. Pretty solid turnout both here in person and online. As Maricela said, no formal votes, but some topics for discussion and questions. So we'll just kind of keep things moving. So we wanted to start with a icebreaker just to kind of get ourselves moving a little bit. So what we'll do once I explain it, doesn't take a lot of explanation, but for those in the room, you will be asked to connect with a person, you know, maybe who's not like right next to you, but across the room. And then I think we'll just put the folks online in kind of one group. So you'll just say, we'll mute you once I'm done introducing the topic. And then we'll go for, which time we allowed 20 minutes. So it might, we'll give you, we'll say 10 minutes, I think, given that we're running a little short on time. And what we'll do for those on the Zoom, you will just have to make sure that each person gets I'm not counting how many people are actually online, but each person probably gets a couple of minutes-ish. And then in the room, I think after 5 minutes, we'll probably ask you to change and find another person. Yeah, so you will actually have to speak to 2 people. And there are 2 questions, so if you aren't able to get through both questions in your 5 minutes with the first person, you will be asked to then move after 5 minutes to the next person. Don't worry about it. Roughly 2.5 minutes per person to talk about the topics. And if you decide to cover something else, so be it. So the 2 questions are, here somewhere, for you to talk about one thing you're looking forward to this summer, and one thing on today's agenda that you're looking forward to learning more about. So again, directions for those in the room. Here in a second, I'm gonna ask you to stand up, find somebody, you will get 5 minutes. 5 minutes to have a conversation with one of that person you're with. And you will talk about either or both topics depending on time. And then someone, I might ask, maybe I'll do it. Somebody else wants to do a timer. I could use some timer now. Who can do a timer? You wanna do a timer? 5 minutes, and then Anya will let you know 5 minutes has passed. Maybe we'll give you a little, warning at like around 4 minutes, but then you'll move and find another person. And again, you 2 topics, have a conversation, then we'll reconvene, find your seat at the table, we'll give you clues on the time. Is that clear? Yes.
Any questions online?
Yeah, great, thanks for any questions online? So again, you are all going to be in a group and you will probably just need to make sure that you each get. I think that is it, 4 people, might not glasses. See how many people there are, I think I see 4 or 5. Yeah, there's more. Oh, okay, 15, so again, this is for, council members. Guests are welcome to kind of listen in, but for council and staff, this is a icebreaker for participation for those folks, so. If you're just joining as a guest. You can just hold until we're done with the icebreaker. All right, we're gonna get going. Anya, you got the timer going for 5 minutes?
Yes.
The questions, or if you have a question, let me know. What were you gonna say, Anya?
Time is on.
Go.
Who's online? I can just see the, this is Molly. I can just see the agenda.
Molly, this is Celeste. I'm also online. I thought they might put us in a breakout room.
Yeah, you're supposed to be going in breakout rooms. Melissa's supposed to be doing that. So let's just give it a second. I'll contact her to make sure she's doing that.
That works.
I think they're having some technical difficulties, so just
Yeah,
sit
I was
tight and we'll get this figured out.
Is it either that or Celeste? How are you doing? It's good to hear you.
Nice to hear you as well. I wish I was there in person in Corvallis today, but I work for OSU now, so I was there yesterday, and I was like, oh, I can only do 1 trip to Corvallis in a week.
Yeah, I agree. I was in Salem yesterday. What are you looking forward to this summer?
Well, I just got back from Greece a week ago, so I did my summer vacation a little early this year. So that was spectacular. I took a 3-week vacation, and I haven't taken a 3-week vacation, I think, ever. So it's been a long time.
Good for you.
Yeah, what about you? What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to it's been a rough spring, and so my daughter graduates from college on Saturday, and so I am really looking forward to her being completely done with education.
Oh, yay. Where does she graduate from?
Eastern Oregon University with her, so she is a teacher, but she will have her license and everything ready to go, so that will be good.
Awesome. Great.
Hey,
Sam,
as you
I
see,
see
Sam's
you
on.
there with us. Yeah, Sam, what are you looking forward to this summer?
Um, completing a report that's due to the governor and legislature by August 31st. I'm being honest.
Totally fair.
And it's taking months to write.
Oh,
It's
Sam,
all good though.
what's the topic on?
It's part of a new bill that was passed in 2024, the short session, um it becomes effective July 1st, but there's a section that a report is due on our JDIP and YSEP funding. So the bill states every even year by August 31st we have to submit a report. So it is what it is,
Oh,
but it's fun.
well, hopefully, and this is the very first one. So after that, maybe it'll be a little easier. Yeah, okay.
Lemonade out of lemon, Sam. That's the best. So are we kind of popping in and including staff in the conversation as well? Because if we are, we have several staff members we can.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. Abraham?
So let's see, plan. So right now we're waiting, I think in a couple of weeks we'll still pick up a brand new van. And then we're planning, I think we're in the planning process, maybe a little late, we'll see. But the goal is probably to drive to Yellowstone at the end of August, take a couple of weeks off with the family. So that's gonna be interesting.
Oh,
That's
fun.
beautiful.
Yes.
Well, Abe, if that's what you end up doing, I lived in Bozeman for a few
Oh.
years, and I ran a camp for youth where I found cancer patients that were children from all across the country and flew them to Montana. And we did some great like sightseeing and all sorts of things in the area. And one of the groups of kids we took into Yellowstone and did backpacking with
Oh,
them.
cool.
So there's a couple of my favorite places, depending on which way you go. I don't know if you can still get into the north part or if that road was washed out a couple years ago. And the entrance on the north part, there was a terrible rainstorm and the road like disintegrated into the river in like a shocking way. So you might have to go around and not that way. But if when you're in the planning stages, let me know.
Yeah, we went when we drove when I used to live in the East Coast. We did a whole cross country trip. We actually stayed in Yellowstone one night. And so that was actually we were there for 2 nights, now that I think about it. But yeah, it was a great time. So now I'm doing it with the kids. So
Oh, fun. Oh, I
yes.
love it. They'll get to see some buffalo. What
Yeah.
about you, Cord? What are you looking forward to?
I don't really have any plans for the summer. There's just been a lot of stuff that's kind of been swirling that's kind of kept us from making a plan. And I mean, we have a 3.5-year-old who's also swirling. So that, keeping him occupied is kind of one of the main goals. And we usually just do like light stuff. Like we'll probably go, my wife's family's in Canada, so we'll go up there for a week. I think we're looking at some time in July that I'll get out and we'll go do that. And that's, just hanging out with family, but it's family. They have a pool, so that's nice. Yeah, so it's just gonna be that and probably a couple of like little like weekenders or short trips around here. So I'm like, I kind of, summer's like my least favorite season. Because I don't like hot weather. That's kind of, I'm just like, I kind of want it to, I just want to get to fall. So I just try to like find ways to stay cool. So go to the beach, go hang out near a mountain, or go hang out at a pool in Canada. That's the plan.
Well, having family members to help with a 3.5-year-old sounds really great too.
Yeah, I always don't know what to do. I'm not, I'm like, I don't have to pay attention right now. This is cool. Yeah, it's really nice to go up there and get to share the joy of a toddler bouncing off the walls. Yeah, so that's what's going on. How about you, Lawrence? What are you doing this summer?
So Cord, I love the summer. It's my favorite time of the year. That's the birthday time for me, the birthday time for my wife. We got married in the summer. So we try to just get out and enjoy that weather. And we take a lot of weekend trips, out of state, in state. We just try to stay as active as we can outdoors while we have that weather available to us. So we've got a couple of trips lined up. For our anniversary, I think we're gonna go out to Hawaii, and like I said, just do a lot of close state trips: California, Arizona, Texas, Washington. Just get out and go.
Nice.
Yeah. And with that, I'll pass it to Sean.
Well, I think Tabiti joined us. Let's get council members. Tabiti, the question is, what are you looking forward to this summer?
Some rest.
No. Said like a great college professor.
But well, just trying to tone it down from the pace of the semester, even from an administrative position. But summer's usually when I try and catch up on reading, really catch up on reading, and I have some projects to try and really dig my feet into it. But like Lawrence, living in the Pacific Northwest, I'm trying to get as much vitamin D as I can from the sun. And so I'm out in it, and I'm trying to run more in the summer to keep this down. And we try and travel a little bit. I'm going to Atlanta tomorrow, and then I have a trip set for Alaska. And I'm trying not to think of anything else. A friend of mine is trying to talk me into going to a football game in September, NFL game. And, so yeah, summer I just try and be active and get out. And,
Great, I think Bill is on here.
Good morning. Yeah. Favorite thing this summer. Quick trivia question. What state or states is Yellowstone in? And I didn't realize it was in 3 states. I'll put it that way. So that I learned that Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, but a lot of people don't know it hits the eastern edge of Idaho. So that was new to me. At least I didn't know that. So, but a lot of little things. Got 5 younger sisters, and they're scattered all up and down the West Coast. So that'll give me a lot of opportunity visit nieces and nephews this summer, and then a couple live music shows at different coming through. Neil Young and Crazy Horse is the big one, so I'll get to see somebody older than my dad rocking out on stage.
Those of us who know your dad won't tell him that for you.
All right, those online, we're back into the room. Can you hear us? Just a sound check for those online. Can you hear me? Those online?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, now I see thumbs up. I looked in the wrong direction. Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Awesome, thank you all. All right, so our next item on the agenda is future ready Oregon presentation.
Will we have slides, or we just have? We will have the slides. Yeah, so you're just gonna share the PowerPoint presentation. I put it in the chat. Oh, great.
So those that are in the room, just, you saw us running around trying to figure out how to get the chat function off the screen. We also learned that your cell may not work in this room. So we had to sign on to Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi code and that stuff is over here. So if you do need to have messaging, you'll have to turn on Wi-Fi calling on your phone on that. We learned it the hard way. We saw us running around.
So will we get the screen, will we get the slides on this screen? Oh. Well, then I'll just start talking. The first slides are whatever. This is YDC in my name. I'm Sally Deck, and I have been handling the Future Ready grants since November of 2022. And sorry, backing up just a little bit. Future Ready was passed in the middle of the biennium, meaning that the staff, this was before I even came to work for YDD, the staff had to, in very short order, get the, great, so let's go one more slide. We'll get to there. So what we're gonna talk about is this high level view of Future Ready, kind of where it started and where it is headed. And key points to listen for have to do with funding and what our options are moving forward. And then also what the successes have been with the funding that we've had and what we've been able to pull off in with very little advance notice. And so the questions for you to be thinking about are, what should we take from the Future Ready experience that we have been able to have and carry it into the 25-27 grants? And then what are some complementary systems building efforts? And that would be an integration of our other funding and our other grants. So we have started to integrate the Future Ready grantees with our re-engagement grantees. And so the question for you is, does it make sense to continue to do that? Are there other systems level integrations that we should be thinking about doing? And that we have this opportunity to write up the 25-27 grants and make them what makes the most sense for what YDO is here now. Next slide, please. So the first round of funding was released in the middle of the biennium, meaning that in so July 1st, 2022 was when the grants first were able to be designed and written, and RFA was put together, folks applied, and so the first grant agreements weren't executed until December 2022. Think about like January 2023, meaning that those folks only had about 6 months to spend out. So there were grants were capped at $150,000. And that was in order to get them out as quickly as possible. That's a financial threshold that is does not require additional oversight. And we knew that they only had 6 months to spend out. So there were some folks who were able to spend out the full 150 in that time. And so that worked really well. And those that weren't, we shifted the money to where it could be spent out. So we had a total of 26 grants, and there were 51 applications. And there were two pieces at play that were really important. Core activities, and so that's the paid work experience, credentialing, or job placement and coaching. So the grantees had to choose one of those things, and almost all of them ended up choosing paid work experiences. And then the other element is the priority populations. So priority populations were named for all of the Future Ready funding. So there's about $200 million in total Future Ready funding in the state of Oregon, of which about $10 million is dedicated for youth. And so the Future Ready priority populations were not written for youth. So they don't include foster youth, they don't include youth experiencing homelessness, they don't include youth who are experiencing re-engagement. They're much broader categories than that. Next slide, please. And so we had about $3 million that we got to spend in 22-23. The remainder, $10 million, is what we are able to use right now. So what we have right now is data from 22-23. So a 6-month window. We have solid data on that that's been analyzed. And in a minute we'll talk about why that's the data we're talking about today. So in that 6-month window, over 1,000 youth were served among those 26 grantees. And there were, functionally, if you add up all those numbers, more than half of those dollars went directly to you. So those were through paid work experiences, that wages were paid. It's also through direct supports, the wraparound supports that you hear us talk about a lot. So that's when youth need help with housing, or they need help with the special uniform or equipment or protective material that they might need, steel-toed boots, other expensive things like that. It can be a real barrier to youth participating in paid work experiences. Those wraparound supports, along with wages, accounted for almost half of the overall funds that were spent. You'll see that there were over 100,000 hours of work that you completed. And so when we think of in a 6-month window, right, and that didn't include much of a summer, right? So that's basically January 2023 through June 30th, 2023, that 100,000 hours of work got completed by these youth. Next slide, please. The other really big part of the Future Ready youth programs was a requirement for essential employability skills training. And so the essential employability skills training, which is a real mouthful. But what it boils down to is that final can be wrapped up in a final bullet. Are youth learning how to function at work? So we think a lot about the soft skills that folks might need. And so that can include help with writing a resume, practice interviewing, practice negotiating the elements like, what time do I need to be at work? When do I clock in? Why is my lunch not a paid break, but those 15-minute breaks are paid? All of those sorts of questions that youth might have as they're trying to join the workforce is bundled in the essential employability skills training, in addition to those elements at the bottom of helping you really be prepared to take whatever jobs they might have in the future. So one of the things that was introduced actually at NYDC, the National Youth Employment Coalition Conference in spring 2023, was this idea of the ABC jobs. And so a job is just any job, right? This is a youth who is learning to show up on time, do the work that is required. And then B is a better job. And that's where a lot of these jobs landed. And then C is the career job, right? So these essential employability skills are something that youth should be able to take into all of these jobs, but we know are critical for any job. And so the Oregon Employability Skills is, it's called OES. I believe it's housed within Western Oregon University. And it is a whole curriculum that got written using not Future Ready funds, but different state COVID relief funds in order to create this entire curriculum that our CBOs can literally copy and paste. So it is designed for CBOs to deliver. So our organizations, our grantees did not have to come up with this curriculum from scratch. If they didn't have one, they could just borrow this one and deploy it. There are also very specific badges that are available, and the badges it's like a digital badge that can be added to someone's LinkedIn profile, and then allows employers to know that a youth has completed specific parts of this curriculum. And so the list at the bottom are actually the different badges that they can earn. And when we think about how powerful it would be if somebody is interviewing a youth to know that, like, wow, this youth has gone through has gone through collaboration, communication, empathy. Wow, this is the first time I'd really like to have customer facing. But I can trust that this youth is still in that.
Favorite CBO.
Oh, I'm sorry. CBO is a community-based organization. Next slide. Actually, I'm gonna pause. Does anybody have any questions on that? Yes.
Do you know if that includes like financial literacy? Any type of financial literacy?
Yeah, so financial literacy, can you go back one slide, please? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jenny Black.
Thanks, Jenny. Oh, it is listed right there. Financial literacy is a key piece of essential employability skills training. And that does look different for different youth. I thought that it was one of the elements of their curriculum as well. But to your point, yes, that is a piece that a lot of youth do need a lot of help with. Even just the like, why are taxes being taken out of my paycheck? Who are these people who are taking my money, right? That those are very real questions that maybe I'll list.
We all need to take the training.
Yeah. It's available for free. You'll have this slide deck. And so it's that how to navigate a paycheck and taxes. And then there are some programs that are focusing even more on what does it mean to create a savings account? What does it mean? Okay, you've earned some cash. How do we help you understand what you might need to save that for? And that some of our demographics are youth who have experienced prolonged poverty, and that can be a very different, like, it may not have been modeled for them, that can be a very different approach to how they use their money.
Sally, this is Parsa. One thing I was curious about when you were covering the key points on the total use served, is there a way to also see how many youth across the state in that number in terms of like either by county or by region?
Yeah, we do have that. I don't remember offhand if the first round of Future Ready was in every single region. I know that this round is in every single region.
Okay.
And we do have the data on where folks are. We have the data on gender breakdowns, with racial and ethnic data. We have a tremendous amount. And so we're going to stay at a higher level today, but yes, that's.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have any online questions?
Anything in the chat?
Hey, this is Cord Bucher, YDD online. I just thought I'd mention that I believe, and Abe, if I'm not correct, please let me know, but I think that we actually have the maps on our website now of where all of our current grants are located. Just as an aside, if anyone is curious about where the current grants are, we have ArcGIS maps set up, and those should actually be in the main page for each of the different types of grants we do.
I can drop the links in the chat.
Yeah, thanks. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and both rounds of Future Ready were run in a current model, meaning that they're regional awards to ensure that every region that had applicants did have at least one grant in that region. So yes, we have good geographic distribution. All right, next slide, please. So for 23-25, we had, as you may have already heard, some pretty serious delays in our grant agreements. And that is why we do not have very much data to share on the 23-25 grantees yet. What we can say is that we have slightly more applicants, and we're able to have slightly more total grantees. So we have 29 this year. We maxed the award at 250,000. And so we have almost 7 million in total awards. Like I said, every region is represented. Grant agreements started being executed in the spring, around February-ish. And so there are some grantees who were awarded in the first year and then were re-awarded. And so they had continuous programming, and that meant they served youth over the summer and into the fall and through the winter. And then we have other grantees who weren't able to start until their grant agreement was in place. So combining that data was going to be very messy. And so we said, let's again stay at this high level, and that fundamentally we're expecting things to be very similar to the way they were in the first round, and that the numbers were more or less matched. So the ratio of like about how many youth were served and about how many hours they worked, we would expect that to be really similar. The essential employability skills requirement remains in the second round of funding as well. So we know that all of the youth will also, it is a requirement for all of the youth to have that training. And then the grantees get to choose whether their core activity is the paid work experience or credentialing or the job placement. And so we are expecting approximately the same. There are more paid work experiences this time. So if anything, we will have more wages paid and more hours worked. Next slide, please. So one of the kind of big deal new things is that in this round, we have required that the Future Ready grantees, as well as our other workforce grantees join in the re-engagement convenings. So re-engagement convenings have been going on since
2020?
yes, 2020, because when they first were done, they were only online. And what we realized is we have an opportunity to bring folks together and require that they be in a room, and we're a little bit waiting to see what all is gonna happen. Our hope is that there would be some intentional partnerships and greater understanding of what's available. And really at the core, what we're hoping for is that a youth who is being served is able to have a warm handoff when they're ready for the next big thing, right? And so that could be a handoff from a re-engagement program to a workforce or a work service provider. Or it could be a handoff of somebody has done workforce training in one location and they're ready for something new. And so for those of you who were present at, I want to say it was the June meeting last year, we had Henny Sullivan from Working Theory Farm come and brought us 2 students with him. And he has an amazing story about that. They have a farm, it's in Hillsboro-ish. It is quite far west of Portland proper. And they needed some construction work done on the farm. And because Henny is connected with the folks at Portland Youth Builders, a crew from Portland Youth Builders came all the way from East Portland, way over to very far west of Portland proper, to be able to do some construction work on the farm. And that meant that those youth got to meet each other, they got to see what was happening. And there was a youth who had been doing work on the farm, who's a juvenile justice impacted youth, and had basically outgrown what the farm could offer as far as his training. And he saw what was happening with the Portland Youth Builders program and those youth, and like the interaction between the adults, for lack of a better word, of Portland Youth Builders and then the youth. And because of Henny's relationship with these other folks, he was able to conduct a warm handoff that youth was able to then connect with Portland Youth Builders and do the pre-apprenticeship program there, and is now a construction apprentice. And so it's this like total success story, right? Of this youth who was able to get very important skills from Working Theory Farm and would not have been ready to go to Portland Youth Builders until he had done what he did at the farm. And then because of the staff at both places having connections, the youth had greater success. So that's a lot of what we are hoping for, and that we have started to see happen. One of the things that is really interesting about this is the distinction between small grantees and big grantees. And that there are some big grantees who really do offer a lot of services. And so they are a little bit less excited to do the outreach to some of their potential partners. But we have these very eager small organizations that absolutely see the benefit in partnering, and we are able to see the complementary opportunities that they serve their youth really well in some ways, and that they can partner with people who serve the youth in other ways. One of the things that we've seen is the geographic connection. So we have, for our convenings, there are 4 areas across Oregon. And so the Portland metro area, there are a lot of grantees, and there's a lot of overlap of youth being able to get services from multiple grantees. But when we look at other areas of the state, sometimes we need to involve other players, maybe a school district or another organization that might not be our grantee, to be able to be a connecting force so that folks who serve the same youth can better connect and do some sense making around that. Next slide, please. So there's a lot happening in this slide. But this is one of the slides that we used when we were talking to the folks at the convenings about kind of how we see re-engagement on the left and workforce and post-secondary education and training on the right. And that within re-engagement, we know that there are youth who need a lot of outreach in order to be brought into the program, and that it can be even just right before they complete, that they disappear again, and that there's more outreach that needs to be done. And we also are now seeing that youth for whom completing high school or a GED is quite difficult, we now can easily see that it is those folks for whom joining the workforce is also difficult. And so for us to be able to to retain that connection And for youth, even after completion of their re-engagement program, to stay connected with that organization allows for that warm handoff to a workforce provider. And that when we look on the right-hand side, we can see that there's a lot of that same similarity, the comings and goings, of like that it is not a linear journey that these youth are on, but that it might require that they go through a bunch of training and they get onboarded at a job, and all the while they're getting coached by our grantees in those essential employability skills. But then also there is this element of when the job isn't a good fit and they need to circle back and they need to do once again the interviewing and the resume. But before that, there's also the really sticky piece of like, how do you quit your job? And then that's hard. And that is right. And so Douglas ESD had a great story. They do a lot of job placements. And so their staff have some really key, maybe nurses, we talk about Melody here. That their staff have some really great connections in the community. And Melody Rutgers told the story about being able to talk very earnestly with the youth to say, I need you to not burn this bridge. Because there's another youth coming after you who's gonna need this placement. And that if this goes south, this employer might not be willing to accept our youth for future placements. And so coaching the youth through how you gracefully quit your job and then start back over. I'm like, okay, and in what order are you gonna do that? Right, and so then that's why we have kind of the same non-linear image on the right-hand side, that we know that somebody might make plans that they're gonna be XYZ job, and they try and it doesn't work, and then they maybe circle back to what does career planning really mean and how are they gonna move? So this is, and then the big arrow in the middle is us really saying that re-engagement is deeply connected to workforce when we think about the support that youth need and deserve to have in their development as they transition into the workforce. Any questions about this? Yeah.
Thanks, Sally. Jeff Parker, for the record. Not this slide, I have a celebration and then a question from this previous slide. One of them is, long ago, we used to require this collective impact in the application process, and it was very transactional. We had applicants coming together with the sole purpose of writing an application. And what we're doing now, I just want to celebrate this, is convening and curating opportunities for cross-pollination to happen, where it becomes much more transformative than transactional. And I just want to celebrate that because that's a significant difference. And then the question I have is $6.9 million, but I heard you say 10 million. And so that there was 10 million in that item to use for this process for youth, but we only awarded 6.9.
Sorry, I misspoke. So we had 10 million over 3 years, basically.
Oh.
So we have about 7 million in grants. Right now, we had about 3.5 million in grants, and then there's also the administrative piece that's fine.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Anybody online have a question? It was a really well-timed doorbell to remind us. All right, let's go to the next slide. So I have some discussion, conversation, questions for you, really thinking about with our most expansive and innovative brainstorming thoughts, what could or should YDO do to support workforce development for youth? Like, how shall that fit into our portfolio moving forward? And so are there specific roles that YDO grants should play? Are there specific roles that YDO as an organization should play in creating system-wide partnerships? What might that look like? I'll open it to the floor.
Xanos room, what kind of funding do we have?
We don't know.
Okay, so it's all gonna depend on the next session.
Yes.
Okay.
So, we do know that the, folks in the governor's office are talking about Future Ready 2.0. So Future Ready, as it is currently known for us, sunsets, next June. And so we are asking the state to project funds for us to do something. And what we are hoping for is that it would be in basically the same, more or less the same amount.
So HEC just released they have a $40 million, is that money they've been holding on to?
So,
And then so I guess, and then what coordination are we doing with them in the distribution of the money, or is that all just guidance that's coming out of the governor's office that's telling us?
yeah, so it's a really good, Janine, that's a really good question. When the Future Ready dollars were divvied up, YDO got our little piece of the pie. And the rest of the pie is required to serve 3 industries, healthcare, manufacturing, and technology exclusively. And that almost all of the programming in the dollars are dedicated to training workers to be like in a big job that has a 401k and a dental plan. And so it doesn't, we have some shared grantees for sure, but it doesn't fit well with most of our grantees and the scale at which our grantees are operating. Also, HEC somehow did different things with the money,
Yeah.
and so their money lasts longer.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just, Brian, and I think there's some significant budget questions, right? Because I think and I don't have an answer. And we continue to talk to to staff in the governor's office and Department of Education. Our budget sits within the department, but these dollars, I think, are being looked at, not just for us, but in other instances, kind of as one-time dollars. So as we go into the next biennium, we know that there's some opportunity to have agencies maybe get some kind of 1% increase, but a one-time singularly funded program like Ready won't count in your kind of current service level budget. So this is an uphill battle to say we had $10 million over the last 3 years. Sure, we'd love to get something, but since those are one-time dollars, we're kind of back to our baseline budget. And also, again, hearing information about the potential for 1% for agencies, 1% of our budget, call it around $400,000. So what I think we will need to think about and consider is how do we, whatever advocacy and support we can generate from the council, but also how might we look at our current service level budget, our current budget, and might we prioritize certain funding in some different ways, right? Say, from the council, the re-engagement in workforce stuff, like maybe maybe you need to increase the funding available for that because of all this good work that's happening. So that's like one way to think about, I think, these hard budget questions is, again, our existing pie, how do we divvy it up differently? Of course, if we take and add more to workforce, that means we have all likelihood, like less for just more sort of general grants. I'll say quickly, just to be clear, I think the re-engagement dollars, those would be considered part of our current service level budget. So we don't have to advocate for more re-engagement money, but the Future Ready money is one time.
It looks like we have a couple questions online. Molly Rogers.
Thank you, Molly Rogers. And I guess you ask lots of questions I wasn't really completely prepared to answer. But a lot of information. And I guess the one that I look at is what role can YDO play in creating system-wide partnerships that support youth? Is I think even mapping out our current grantees and the systems at the local level of which they have partnered with, and creating a map to see what impact we have currently developed across system-wide partnerships would be really helpful for for myself, if I'm in a role of advocacy for anything around the dollars, and also for me to be able to articulate and see what systems we have engaged and partnered with. So I guess the role that YDO/YDC, YDD staff could play is creating a map for me to be able to understand what has happened.
Okay, thanks, Molly.
And Celeste Jensen.
Hi, everyone. This is Celeste Jansen. I wanted to address the second question up on the screen. If you think about like the K-12 education system and the fact that teachers have to go to college, get a teaching license, have continuing education, and for the environments that children are in, there are districts, there are positions like TOSAs, there are ESDs. There's just so much infrastructure to support teachers in the classroom. And then you look at out of school time, we want really wonderful things to happen. They're creative spaces. We want them to be safe. We want them to be effective. And really, we're saying to nonprofits, good luck out there. We hope you're doing everything right. We'll fund you. I think there is so much power to what the YDO could be doing and convening nonprofits. I really love that this Future Ready brings people together to share and to innovate. I want to lift up what Jeff said. For years, we had this clause that asked for people to make collective impact in their grants and apply as a community. And those partnerships we didn't see as really successful, but I really appreciate that the convenings and the way that they're facilitated helps people share knowledge. I'm a part of an initiative that Oregon Community Foundation does, and we bring together grantees that are a part of that do middle school programming, and we're about to transition to a greater focus on social emotional learning. And when we hold those events, people say things like, I didn't know people had jobs like mine. I mean, there's so much power to be able to bring people together and learn and really deepen the quality of the work. And quality means outcomes. It's really important in youth development that we focus not just on who is served and the numbers of served, but the quality. And so I just really am excited by that. This idea, it takes time and attention and dedication, but there's a role here that the YDO can play, is well situated to playing. There's organizations in Oregon like Oregon Ask that do support community-based organizations that would be great partners, but also Oregon Ask focuses a lot on licensed childcare providers that are younger. And so for the type of nonprofits that work with older youth and that help youth with transition to the career and college and also re-engagement, there's just a really important role, and YDO fills it. And there are others out there who would love to learn and love to participate that are not grantees as well. So the more we talk about this, I think there's more of just so much possibility and capacity, and it will only help our state get better. So I'd love to talk more about this when we have time to do so.
Thank you, Celeste. I love all of that. And I particularly the element of what role we play as convener and setting the table and inviting people to come and then making the table as big as it needs to be so that folks can be included, school districts and others that we don't fund. So I promised I would be done at 11 and then it's over. But I would love for these thoughts to just kind of percolate, and we will be having ongoing conversations. Paul's going to talk about some of them as we make plans about what should this look like moving forward. And we really want to be able to tap into the collective wisdom in this council to be able to make them as effective as possible. the collective impact was before my time, and I just keep hearing people talk about like, no. And so like, we're not gonna do that. And yet it does seem really hopeful to bring people into a room together. Jenny, you had a question.
It's just, yeah, just in that, Jenny left, I'm guessing part of the reason collective impact maybe didn't go very well because of probably and bringing people together, well, yeah, and could have been a lot of factors, but bringing people together takes capacity and resources, and putting that on top of an organization that's serving hard to serve youth is a lot, right? And as part of like a service delivery grant. I've seen really successful partnership building grant programs. So like for, pretty small amount of money, you can really like fund organizations to work together. In situations like with youth, it's great to have those be like regional focus, right? So there's the partnerships across the state of like all of the funding partners that are working with you. But then there's also the regional partnerships that are unique to that region. And oftentimes in areas like, especially outside of urban areas that don't have a lot of organizations, those convenings don't happen. But yeah, partnership building.
Sally, I know you're over, I just quickly, priority populations, you mentioned them at the beginning and how this was kind of signed more around the adult population, right? Only a small portion of this goes to youth. So what are, I'm assuming juvenile justice, I think I remember this vaguely, juvenile justice involved youth or impacted youth are part of the priority population. What other groups fall under that category that we might be serving? So for example, LGBTQ plus youth, those are, I think I remember hearing that.
Yeah.
Youth of color, what?
So the order that they're, communities of color, women, low-income communities, rural and frontier communities, veterans, persons with disabilities. It's named incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, so issues like that's how we talk about it. Members of Oregon's tribes, people who experience age-based discrimination, and they did not mean you. But the way they wrote it is actually open-ended enough. And then members of the LGBTQ community.
Thank you.
So in our data collection, we have to ask those questions, but then we are also asking, are these youth, foster youth, experiencing homelessness, et cetera?
So yeah, you said here that some but not all of the youth were furthest from opportunity. So what you're saying is of the 1,100-ish youth who were served, it's a smaller amount that fit into those categories. There are,
Great question. No, it is something like 93% of the youth we served fit into one of those 10 priority populations. The deal is they're priority populations. They are not the same as our re-engagement eligible youth, right? People don't have to be in a priority population to be served by the future grants. And that's how we ended up with some people who are wealthy and privileged who benefited from like the lifeguard training program that the YMCA has run. So 93% of the youth we served did fit into the priority populations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. The next item on our agenda.
Oh, sorry, we have one question from Portal.
Sure, I was just going to say that one thing that is worth noting about the original Future Ready legislation is that our section specifically describes the youth we serve, youth who are disconnected from school or work or in a re-engagement program, as they're not named as a priority population in the part of the legislation that lists those. But I think we always saw it as like our grants are the ones that are aimed at serving young people. There are youth served by some of the HEC programs, but our grants are purely focused on youth who fit into this, re-engaged or disconnected from school or work group. So just that I mean, I think Sally kind of covered it, but just want to note that like as we kind of look at the future, that's one of the things that was unique about the Future Ready Youth programs.
Yeah, I'd like to make the last point, and that is just in terms of the positioning for any new dollars beyond 1%, and to continue this future ready work, which sounds like it's very powerful. With the governor's focus on homelessness and behavioral health, I always go back to basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and this program sets youth that are vulnerable on a trajectory where they cover their basic needs, and that's escape those every challenges. So the more that we can emphasize that, I think the better. Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. This conversation will be ongoing, just not right now.
Excellent.
All right, we're gonna moved to our next presentation real quick. Just want to acknowledge that we've had some additional council members join. Just thank you for being here. We see you. I'm just looking over Maricella's shoulder here. It looks like Jocelyn has joined. Thanks, Jocelyn. Robin Johnson also joined. We have also on the line Savannah Rialtos, who is soon to be, hopefully, YDC. We're just waiting for appointments from the governor's office, so Savannah's there, I think, in the background. And we were also gonna have Rachel Mosier, who's the advisor in the governor's office. She might join the conversation at some point, so when we see her, we'll pop up. But to Robin and Jocelyn and Savannah, welcome to the meeting.
Also to BD.
Oh, and Tabidi,
Yeah.
Tabidi, our vice chair. Hello, Tabidi, we're waving. Thanks for being here. We're gonna keep moving since we're a little over time. But again, just want to acknowledge this.
We'll turn it over to Paul, I believe, yes, for, to cover request for application update.
As, Zan, thanks for the lead in terms of like this next conversation, as well as Sally pointed out that yes, we want to continue this conversation. And so, surprise, this is where this key point is right now. So, Janae, if you can advance the slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about our youth grants RFA update. And so there is an ask in this, just to put it out there very clearly, is that we really want to continue these conversations around what does it look like in 25-27. So next slide, please. So just to kind of ground where we are, we kind of have 3 sections until we launch RFAs again in the 2020. Our request for application, sorry, in terms of that. So right now we're working on the RFA framework and development, the large elements of that work, which does include the conversation around Future Ready 2.0 or whatever we're going to call that work. So I'll give a little detail here in a minute. Into the fall and winter, that's when we really hit a high gear on the materials creation for that request for application process. And then in the spring and summer, that's when we hope to evaluate and start issuing those intent regulations. There's a lot of detail into that, but again, just kind of a high level overview. A couple of key points that we are focused on as a team is the September update at the YDC, the YDC meeting in September to provide an update, and then a final approval in December of 2020. So that's not that far away. We also want to open up the process and be very transparent, just continue to be as transparent as we can in the process, but also not do that 30-minute digestion of the entire RFA process and break it up into a process so we can really engage in conversation and input from the YDC. So next slide, please. So when we look at our youth grants framework as a team, we really have narrowed it down to this overarching concept around keeping 3 requests for applications or the RFAs focused on community investments, re-engagement, and workforce. And purposely saying we need to carve out workforce because there's a lot of questions there. Because if you're doing your timeline, legislative session starts when we're planning to release some of our RFAs. So there's going to be some work that's happening. And so that flexibility around what it looks like for workforce can allow the legislative process to happen. and have flexibility. You see under there that continued connection around re-engagement collaboratives on that.
The convenience.
The convenience, sorry. So we call them re-engagement collaboratives. There's a lot of detail around it. Those are the convenience that you've heard us reference onto it. And just to put some context to that, there was about 70 of our grantees in a week and a half period that we pulled together conversations around it. So over half of our grantees in all of the work that we do came together for conversations within that work. So next slide, please. So when we talk about what this looks like, I shared this slide back in December of 2023 of continuous improvement with our grants. And so just want, again, kind of ground us on where we are in the process. And so we have 4 elements that we can look at as we look at it. Intertwined in that is that external review that we had happen. And so that is something that is very much on our mind and the focus at that point. But focusing on where we can improve within the application, where we can improve along the evaluation line, the awards, and then also post-award, how do we do those processes? And those are kind of that grounding element as a team that we're looking at within that. So what that means and why we're doing an update now is, next slide, please, is that we want to start an application work group as part of the YDC work. And similar to the work that you've been seeing with board and the strategic plan, I really want to engage in the conversation. So it's again, pointing back to Sally, like we want this conversation to continue because I think it's going to advance our processes and ultimately what we award in grants. And so we want to establish a work group as part of this work. And so that'll begin here in July. So as part of that work group and part of the asks for the members of the YDC is we want to review and discuss key RFA components. So that includes that youth grants framework. So what does that workforce RFA look like and what specific pieces do we want to focus on? So the conversation around priority youth could be part of that. And what does that look like as we do this awarding process? The continuous improvement areas, again, opportunities for improvement from the external review are a key factor of that work. And so we want members of our community and our council to be a part of that and see where we are. So a couple examples of that right now is our team is working on rubric refinement as well as our appeals, protest and appeals process. Sorry, I forgot the keyword there. So that's where we started in terms of that work. So having the council involved in that. Other areas that we know we need to look at and we really want to engage in conversation is around application and award limits. What does that look like for that has that focus and conversation, right? Both at the council as well as our team, and what does that look like and how do we go through that process? And be very sensitive, because the reality is those organizations that have multiple grants from us, that has impact as we do that. So how do we balance in that conversation? And then also applicant eligibility, right? So one of the things that we're wrestling with is right now we're requiring folks that are workforce and re-engagement related to come to convenience, right? So is that part of our eligibility requirements that you have to be aware of that? So we want to engage in that conversation. As well as other eligibility pieces that we need to just dive deeper into. Because just reminding us, we had about a 30% award rate. So we have a lot of applicants that really want to participate in this work. And so what does that mean in terms of eligibility access? And then lastly, the RFA scope and focus, that's defining that, right? So as we define that, what does that work, the RFA look like for workforce compared to our community investment grants, and how do we define that on that? And then just as I shared before, increase the input and discussion transparency of the RFA development process. It's nothing that is secretive and hidden. Obviously, we can't put the questions out there before we release our RFA, but we want to engage in conversation of what these things look like and purposely engage our community within that and involve what he's in that conversation. So next slide, please. So what that looks like, the first request for application RFA work group meeting, looking to set that the week of June 24th, so the end of this month. So if you are intrigued in these conversations and want to know the inner workings about right now, this plan is about 40 million of grant awards. Please be stay tuned to that. The reason we don't have debate yet is Melissa and I realized this morning that we probably should coordinate all the other things that are happening, so they should happen at the same time. So we will work. We'll have a meeting to set the meetings and communicate that out. And then subsequent meeting schedule will develop that meeting. So right now the plan is 2 meetings a month in July and August, because that is going to be the big lift of that work. because we need to get the bones worked out and then kind of a once a month meeting for that. And so the intent of doing that, leading to that December meeting, will be is that work group really has an opportunity to dive deeper into the conversation. And then that December presentation is, hey, the work group developed this, here's where it is, here's what we're offering and what we'd like to have. So that you don't have to do 30 minutes of me talking at super high speed. And then lastly, present that final RFA process. So that work group would be a part of presenting updates in September as well as the December update. So just trying to expand the transparency. I didn't need this system. So thanks, Ali, for letting me borrow your computer that I didn't use. But with that, I just want to add, that's actually the end of my slide. We'll turn it over to Lawrence in just a minute. But any questions or thoughts around that work in that?
Thanks, Jeff Parsons, for the record here. Just real quickly, will this need to go through a Department of Justice review once we've changed eligibility requirement and application? And when does that happen? Does that happen after the December meeting? What's the risk of it holding things up?
Great question. So some of those regulations, I'm not versed enough on those regulations of it, but yes, our larger grants will have to go through the Department of Justice review in terms of meeting legal sufficiency, which is a critical element to that work. And so those have shifted, and those are shifting. Again, I don't feel comfortable enough knowing them in detail for that, but depending on the level of grants that we did. So this last time, anything above 150,000 in the biennium had to go through a legal sufficiency review, and that is slightly changing, and so that'll be a part of this conversation once I dive deeper into the policy around that work. And the reality is, yeah, that can keep a part of the reason why we are trying to really project those opportunities. So some of the things that we also recognized is doing 3 RFAs at the exact same time, 400 applications, kind of just unknowing to us, overwhelmed the system of procurement. So all those initial reviews, right? So we're also having those discussions of what does it look like to maybe tier releases of RFAs and tier intent to awards process. So that'd be a part of the work. Great question. Thank you. Other questions? I realized I did not probably say for the record, I also subject to my idea. So apologize for those taking note in our recording.
I see a question online. That says, will that be an official work group?
Melissa, I know definitely we can get back. So Bethany's not a member of the council, but we appreciate the question. So we'll note it.
Well, I will ask the question differently then. What? Good. You need from us? What from council member? What do you need from? Is this raise your hand if you want to jump into this? And I'll just full transparency. I'm super intimidated about taking on 2 months in July and August. I'd love to be a part of it, but my bandwidth during the months. So
to be honest, I really do need some council member input on those meetings and recognizing, especially depending on your schedule, where if your busy months are summer, recognize that is a challenge, but we really do need some council members on that committee to ground it and help us kind of move that forward. So my ask is that if there are some council members that have some opportunity for it, we'll design those work groups around the council members that are able to commit to it. I would also say it doesn't necessarily have to be every single time that you are part of it. But to engage in that conversation is a big piece for me that we are engaging in meeting those redesign and that framework to meet the councils.
So would council members expect email coming up in once the 2 of you figured out where it fits, and then we can volunteer ourselves?
Exactly, and we will try to detail as much as we can of like who should be on that, who's going to have voice in the committee and all of that. That'll be something that Melissa and I just have not set down. So anticipate that in the next week or so.
And Court has his hand raised as well.
Yeah, I just thought I would offer, I'll later on be talking about the strategic planning work group, which is the first time we've actually used the work group model. And I think some of the thinking here is that we had, I think, a success with that work group model. And I believe the goal will be to do something similar. And what I think is maybe helpful to know and how it's different from a committee is that it is kind of meant to be a little more modular. That the work group met regularly and folks were invited to participate as they're able. And since it's, you know, essentially a staff-led effort, it's on us to keep the work flowing and to keep things viable for people to kind of come in and out as they choose. Now, we had some folks who participated in all of the strategic plan work group meetings. We had folks who came to one or two, but the idea is that it gives people a chance to participate as much as they're able to. And we try to set the meetings up so that there's something you can kind of dive into, you know, kind of frame what we've been doing, and then have it be something where you can actually engage in the work for the time that you're able to. So I believe that's kind of the goal. It may be a little different as Paul and the team get it rolling, but it is meant to not be like, oh, if I commit, I have to be there every week, or it shouldn't require that of a council member.
Thanks, Gordon. And I think one of the things that I probably didn't capture very well is that the work group is going to have to focus on certain things, so large tasks, right? So one of the first couple of things that we were addressing are rubric and our protest appeals process. So that'll be a very specific topic in that work group. And to keep the things rolling with the RFA, we will have to have that discussion, move forward, and then bring maybe that back later. But that'll also be a critical element, because as we build out RFAs, things build on top of each other. So setting the rubric and then setting how reviewers do comments and all of those pieces all add, and it just happens very quickly. So it'll be an ever-changing agenda that would be focused. So if you are interested in something specific, so maybe you're interested in the re-engagement collaboratives and how that connects, that would be a topic in that work group to engage. So thanks, Gordon, for that clarification.
Any for Lawrence?
Yeah, so I'm going to turn it over to Lawrence for a quick update. Oh, I did it as a second.
Nope.
Next slide, please.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone. Lawrence White, Youth Development Oregon Racial and Ethnic Disparities Coordinator. In the interest of time, I would like to briefly provide an update on the status of our fiscal 2021 and 2022 requests for applications for the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Title II formula grants. The RFA is open at this time. The opening of the RFA occurred on May 22nd of this year. And it has been posted on our agency website along with all accompanying attachments and addendums. We are suggesting at every opportunity applicants read the RFA in its entirety. The 3 program areas for this RFA are community programs and services.
Hey, Lawrence.
Yes.
No, we're not advancing slides. I don't know if there you go. So Lawrence, let maybe Tanisha know when you want to move.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Brian. So like I said, we are suggesting at every opportunity applicants read the RFA in its entirety. Again, the 3 program areas for this RFA are community programs and services, alternatives to detention, and delinquency prevention. And all 3 program areas have 2 awards available in each category. So in essence, there are a total of 6 available grants for issuance. We held our pre-application information session on Monday, June 10th of this year. And that recording, along with the PowerPoint presentation, can be found on our website under the Prevention and Justice tab. I believe we provided very useful information in terms of expectations or the scope of activities and the requirements of potential recipients in the areas of data collection, collaboration, and reimbursements. So some important dates to note and some deadlines to note for this RFA are questions and requests for clarification are due no later than June 24th, 2024. And please note all inquiries must be directed to the specific point of contact as referenced in the RFA. We anticipate providing an official question and answer document which will be posted on our agency's website approximately July 1st of this year, 2024. The closing date for this RFA is July 22nd, 2024. And we anticipate with enthusiasm and a little hope an issuance of notice of intent to award approximately on August 30th, 2024. The process and the platform we are using for applicants to apply is through SurveyMonkey Apply, which we refer to as SM Apply. And again, all information, excuse me, for potential applicants to apply can be found on our agency's website. So that's where we are currently in the process of this RFA, and once we've closed the RFA on July 22nd of this year, we will move into the initial phases of determining eligibility and evaluating those applications that responded to our requests for these applications. Again, in the interest of time, thank you all. If there are no questions at this time, or if no other staff have anything else to add, I'll turn it over to Cord for an update on the strategic plan. Any questions?
I'll ask a question. Zan over here. We don't recall last time we made these grants because it's been a while.
It's been a while.
So do these typically go to larger organizations that work in larger geographic areas or statewide, because there are so few, or who typically applies for them?
So Lawrence, this is Anya speaking. Do you want me to respond?
Yes, please.
Because after the longer history of our program. So it depends. It depends on the application and the applicant. So it could be a very small community-based organization. It could be a county juvenile department, whether big or small, or jurisdiction. So it really is anybody. So the winner for this application process has to demonstrate a few things. One, it has to be a service directed at serving use. So serving use is key. It cannot be for planning and, some kind of abstract thing. It's not for system improvement. It's the direct service for kids. Kids need to be either involved in juvenile justice system or where the services need to prevent them from entering into the system. Also, the racial and ethnic disparities work is key to these grants. And that's why Lawrence is in charge of the review process and I'm involved with the administrator for the grant awards once they're selected. So all these things need to come in place. So yeah, so we have a scoring system, which is also posted on, I don't know, Lawrence, is that link? Is that the link, that says FY 21-22 times 2?
Yeah.
So it would be okay to open it? Who has the control? So anyway.
Joey Pickle.
Thank you. So, like for instance, then in your area, Jackson Street, just closed their grant about a year ago, so they were receiving. Well, they were actually, sorry for taking a little detour here. So Jackson
No, go
Street
ahead.
was just noted as an exemplary program by the OJTP in their newsletter. Well, I'll send it to you. So anyway, it could be a small program like alternative use activities, and I think it could be anything. So it's really like another caveat. But what's different about these grants is that anybody who is on the council is welcome to join the review, because that's part of the act, the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. The Title II recipient, it's the council members and staff who will make the determination who gets the award, not the independent group. Because we need expert eyes, not to say that independent reviewers don't have, but has to be a collective decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
And I'll note Brian Devon, the YDD director. I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, maybe in December, just as a reminder, in the past, these Title $2 we've made in collaboration with our juvenile justice committee,
decisions about, where these awards go. So there's been an application process. We've had good discussions around juvenile service, the Juvenile Justice Committee brought the decisions here to the council. This time we're doing this like even more public process using our SM-Apply system and this kind of full RFA. So just a reminder that that's also a little different, more expanded process for these type of developments.
There's no comments.
We're gonna keep it smooth and pace.
So we'll pass it to Cord to go over the strategic plan.
All right, thank you. As a time check, when should I be aiming to complete this section of the meeting?
I have about 15 minutes for 10-15 minutes. We gotta move. I think we're behind.
Behind schedule is what I thought. Okay, great. Well, I will keep it moving. Cord Bucher, Deputy Director for Development Division. I'm gonna give everybody an update on what we've been doing in the strategic planning work group and sharing today proposed strategic plan structure. Next slide, please. So this is what we're going to talk about today. The strategic plan work group met 4 times in May and June. I really appreciate everyone who's here today that participated in that. We had council members, we had some partners, and we had staff coming together to work on this. The work there really focused on defining a structure for the new plan, and we've developed a proposal. I have something today that I'll kind of share, walk you through. This structure will accommodate the ideas from our fall YDO retreat. It's going to support us prioritizing the actions we're going to take, and it's going to link the strategies that we develop to outcomes that we're hoping to achieve. Can we go to the next slide, please? So in the work group, one of the things that we did was look back at the 2021 plan. I should note, so this slide for folks who have printouts there in person, I made some edits last night to try to shorten this because I knew I'd have to get it done in less than 20 minutes. So some slides have been combined, and there is some stuff that I'm just going to say but not show you on a slide. So if this looks a bit different, that's why. So the 2021 plan was really oriented around these 3 goals you see on the left: system alignment and transformation, youth voice and resilience, and community capacity and justice were these 3 big categories. And within each of those, we had strategies that were related to the overarching goal, and each strategy consisted of the actions that would help us to achieve that strategy. On the right side, there's something we've referred to in the conversations as approaches. They're really approaches to our grant making and our policy work. This is kind of manifested in different ways over the last few years since we developed the plan. It wasn't really a structural element, but it's something we pulled out and saw some value in as we were trying to think about how we might create a structure for the next plan. We wanted to maybe capture some of the ideas in these goals and in these approaches. In the 2021 plan, ultimately the structure was something that was a bit of an afterthought. We spent time in retreats and in a work group developing the ideas in the plan, the strategies, the actions we wanted to take. And then we had a lot of content and tried to cobble a structure on top of that. Say, well, I think these things are all related and we'll call them systems alignment and transformation. So structure wasn't something we started with. It's something we tried to apply after the fact. The other issue is that those overarching goals, as we called them, are not really goals. It's sort of hard to look at the stuff in the 2021 plan and really understand what success looks like for a lot of the things that we talked about in that plan. Strategies and actions weren't really connected to measurable outcomes. And then the actions weren't really prioritized. We had a lot, I think probably well over 100 different things we needed to do in that plan. And there wasn't really a lot of guidance that we gave ourselves in terms of where to start. We started where it made sense to start, but the plan wasn't built with a time-based way of thinking in it. And overall, it was a very long plan. So there was a lot there. And so structure would have probably helped us just in navigating the amount of content we had. So learning all that stuff from our last plan, can we go to the next slide, please? There were really a few goals we had in what we developed. We wanted to create a structure that's easy to follow and gives us a way of organizing our priorities from the retreat. The work group started talking about prioritization of all these ideas that we had in the retreat, but we really needed somewhere to hang all of this stuff. We wanted to build in a means of prioritizing and creating a timeline so that as we were creating this plan, when things are happening is part of how we're thinking about it. And then we wanted to connect all the strategies and actions to measurable outcomes. So those were really the goals in what we've developed. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see a graphic where I'll show you what this draft strategic plan structure looks like. So I'll give folks a second to look at this, and then I'll talk a little bit about what these different levels mean. So if you're starting from the top, you've got the guiding elements, which our previous plan had. The last plan had mission, vision, values, and beliefs. Here, rather than values and beliefs, we'll have our YDO equity statement that's been developed by the equity committee. And the other values and beliefs, I think, will manifest in different ways throughout the plan. Instead of those overarching goals, we have these three imperatives. This is really the how of the work that we do: prioritizing prevention, creating connection, and enhancing equity. I'll talk more about what those things mean in a bit. Each of those imperatives is made up of 4 modes. It's the who of how we serve people. So the work we do directly with youth, the work we do with our programs, our grantees, work with communities, and work with systems. And then for each of those modes, there are strategies and actions. So when we're talking about how we work with programs, there will be a set of strategies related to how we work with programs to do prevention work. And each strategy, of course, will consist of actions. Strategies now are really going to have a both a measurable but also a time-based outcome. So I've given that the when, although it is a little bit of the what to. And actions are specific steps that we take to advance that strategy. So when we take an action, we're really measuring an output. That is, we did the action, but the success of a strategy will be an outcome. And I'll unpack what that looks like a little later on in the presentation. I can leave this up and take a few questions, or I can talk more about the imperatives. But I'll pause for a second and see if anyone wants to jump in right now.
I'll say that I like it. I wasn't involved in any of the work groups, and I kept looking at that date on the calendar and not being able to do it. But I think this is a great structure, and it gives us a much better framework to work with in terms of putting together our overall program. I'm very much like the prevention, connection, equity buckets.
Great, thank you. Can we jump to the next slide?
Corey, you have a comment from Tabidi, I think.
Yes, that slide, the graphic is in the printout. There were some discussion slides I took out, so those are not going to be in this presentation here, but they're in the printed version. But that graphic is in there. So these 3 imperatives, I'll quickly read through this. This is just trying to kind of explain a little bit what we mean by these big pushes around our work. I mean, prevention is something we talk about a lot, and it has the work of the prevention and justice team is a big part of that, but disrupting youth disconnection as well as youth crime and violence are really all areas of prevention that we can work in by addressing root causes. And we want to foster a culture of safety, belonging, and hope. Creating connection is really about making the spaces and the relationships and opportunities for youth to engage and re-engage. That is really kind of, to some extent, the heart of our work as a grant-making agency, to create those opportunities for young people, to help them build skills for learning, work, and life, and make positive change. And enhancing equity is, I think we really wanted to think about the way that we put equity into action in this strategic plan. And so here, this addresses our work to identify and eliminate disparities, to work for more equitable, just, and responsive systems, and ensure all youth can thrive in their chosen educational and career paths. And I'll pause. Molly, I see your hand up.
Yes, and I like these, please, as I comment, I think this is a great starting point, but one thing that's becoming more and more evident to me, and Brian and I have had this conversation kind of at length, and so I'm just curious on where he would think about this coming into the imperatives, is really how do we don't work in a silo at the state agency level, and where do we push and drive the discussion of state agency relationships and being at the appropriate tables for policy discussions outside of just a little bit of grant dollars. And so maybe that comes from my perspective that we serve as the state advisory group for juvenile justice and the OJDDP, but really trying to figure out, again, this is really good, but we need to be ensuring that we're sitting at policy tables at the state level and driving those discussions and advocating that if there's ever a work group or a task force or anything that we have representation at those tables. So I don't know, Brian, if you can help me out with that or not.
Yeah, I can, and maybe Ford will go here in a second, because those, maybe to Naja's driving, you could go back a couple slides.
We could
and
go to the
again-
next one actually, and that would maybe help me answer the question.
And the next one probably has this. Oh, good, the modes. I mean, I think our work has impacted these different, within each of these modes, right? At a sort of individual and youth level, a programmatic level, community level, and a systems level, which I think, Molly, is what you're getting at. And you can, I don't need to read this stuff at the bottom, but you see it, that it's for me, that systems level work, those tables, those task forces, advisory groups, are part of that system level, or maybe we'd even say policy level work. So that thinking about those imperatives as the kinds of things we would advocate for or educate about at these, or fund at these different levels is the way we're thinking about it. So I hear you, and I think the systems level work is critical, as these other modes are.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Molly, does that kind of help to sort of kind of identify where that piece is?
It identifies it. I don't think it's strong enough. I think that we're selling ourselves way too short. But we can get to that point.
All right, great. Well, yeah, I think it's a great question. I think that, in sharing a lot of the language here, I mean, I think that these have gone through a lot of work in the work group, and this isn't necessarily meant to be the final ways that we might describe these things, but just to kind of just quickly reemphasize what Brian said, that for each of those imperatives, so for the work around prevention, I mean, there is youth level and program level work, but it's recognizing that at each of those, that there's work that has to happen at systems level with other agencies, with lawmakers, with policymakers, at the local, state, and on the national level as well. We can jump to the next slide, but I want to, given the time, I want to just quickly note that this was something that we had been sort of sharing in community engagement in 2022. And this is just another way that we had talked about those 4 modes of work. And that's something that I think has been really helpful as we're trying to think through like the different levels that we're doing things at. And then if we go to the next slide, one of the things I wanted to try to share, and this is a lot of text, I know, but just an example of how we have all these priorities we identified in the retreat, and what that might look like if you try to build it into this plan model. So up in the top right, you see a priority that we had in the retreat around enhancing data sharing between schools and community organizations for youth re-engagement. So for the sake of this, I've thought of that as a prevention sort of priority, because it's really about preventing disconnection, about having schools share information about youth who are leaving school so that re-engagement programs can serve them. So if we think about it as a program mode strategy, that might be establishing a data sharing protocol for our re-engagement programs. So we're giving them something that programs can use to work with schools and districts to share information. I won't read all the actions, but kind of breaking down what are the steps that we need to take in order to build this thing. And what is the outcome that shows us that having a data sharing protocol is improving this sharing of information between schools and districts? Well, we want to see 75% of our programs have these data sharing and or referral agreements with local schools or districts among grantees in 2027. So we build something, we help our programs to adopt it and use it. And then one of the things that someone in the work group asked for that I think is something we ought to really be looking at with everything we develop is, what does success look like for a young person, for a family, for people in a community? So for this one, for a young person, if you stop attending school, it means that within 2 weeks of you de-enrolling from school, there's someone at your door offering you an option to reconnect with education. So what does it feel like if we have better data sharing? It feels like people are finding you if you stop going to school and they're offering you a way back in. I also did an example of this looking at it more from that systems level. So I work with ODE to identify and remove the barriers for programs to get this data. Again, looking at the action we take with ODE to try to make it easier for schools and districts to share the information. We create guidance and policy to support a protocol, and then we confirm that it's being used, and success looks like programs and school districts have a model they can adopt so that there's no mystery about how to share that information in a way that's safe, in a way that's permitted, in a way that helps programs to reach young people. So the system impact is one that makes the work easier for organizations to do the work. So I know there's a lot here, folks. This is in the printed version and it'll be in the version we post online. So you can just sort of see how we move through these imperatives to different modes of work and what strategies and actions look like, and then how outcomes are described here. I think that is the last slide before some discussion. And so we can maybe just jump to the next slide and then answer any other questions or thoughts folks wanted to share. And I will quickly say that if there are things that you want to change, and if you'd like to get involved in some of the work around this, I do plan to hold some more strategic planning work group meetings in the summer, probably starting in, we might do one in late June. Most likely we'll be doing that in July and August as we continue developing the plan and bring more back to the council in September, and of course do some community engagement as well. So you could certainly reach out if you have input, but there will be more opportunities for participation in that work group if you have time.
Zan Woodrow here, Court, mission, vision, and values. Well, we're not doing the values, but mission, vision, and equity statement. I'm wondering whether or not there's an opportunity at that level to speak to systems alignment and being the experts in this arena. And maybe that would help to address all these concerns that we go missing that systems alignment work.
Thank you, Zan. Definitely think about that.
Change those things or possibly, we'd happy to look at it. I mean, it would be great, given the work that folks did over the last plan, to not necessarily to have to do a lot of wordsmithing, but I think that language is in there. I think Molly's point is a very good one, because there have been instances where we don't get included or somehow we're not thought of. And I think holding ourselves accountable to that and having strength about our position. I think there's plenty of opportunity to massage this and work on this through the end of the year to get us to the right place.
Did we have this hand raised?
Yes, thank you. I am curious if you could talk a little bit about you said the things seem to be, as far as priorities, all over the place, but I'm curious about, what priorities that were really important didn't get addressed effectively.
The last time.
Sorry, I think I may have been referring to the 2021 strategic plan.
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't have that slide here, but I know at the retreat, we shared a list of some of the stuff that we did not yet accomplish. I mean, one that comes to mind is that there was like the notion of like, producing a white paper related to disparities across different systems, where it's something that might have been a little bit just outside of the capacity or purview of just YDD. Other things I think were just not so much that they were all over the place, but and again, it was so much it was all over the place. It was actually just a lot. It was about a 22-page plan, just a lot of content. So there were just a lot of actions and a small team to carry them out. And then as the work unfolds, different priorities, new priorities emerge. So it wasn't, I think it's all kind of stuff that we had shared in the retreat, but I'm happy to, I can pull that stuff back up because I do think as we now, if we move forward with this structure and we start to build things into it, work that was identified in the previous plan and hasn't been done can probably find its way back into the next plan. So I don't think anything is lost just because we didn't get to it or because it just didn't have the capacity or urgency behind it. Does that kind of answer the question, TBD?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you.
This is Mary Fuller, Data for the record. At the retreat, we kind of went over this a little bit, and it seems like, especially given that time period, when it's rampant, I feel that we accomplished a lot of our goals. The ones that kind of fell through the cracks, I think, were our focused goals, like percentage on the council, our subcommittee, and we wanted to have a youth summit. So those were the ones that we were not able to get to largely because of COVID, but now coming out of that, those are all priorities for us now. And we've increased recruitment recently. We have new youth coming on board soon. So we're aware and focused on reaching the goals.
Any other questions or comments? I know it's a lot, so just Court, I think, and myself, I may, again, Brian Detman, we are to a point, if I'm not mistaken, in the agenda where I'm gonna grab your attention. Have we didn't get to the committee updates, but maybe it feels like a time to. Should we try to do the committee updates quick or go to lunch? I don't want to rush us to run on.
And then let's do that because we have our guests joining us at noon.
Yeah.
To give their presentation.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Okay, so. Go ahead.
I'll say it. Yeah. We're gonna go to lunch. We're gonna take a break. So those online, breath, get up, do whatever. Gonna be relatively fast. I think we'll try to get back here. You got like 7 minutes. I know bathrooms and everything might take a minute longer or two. So we'll just get our lunches and we'll be back to the table. NBC Research is gonna talk about the June crime prevention report they put together. So that's to come in the afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah.
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 Oh, wow. You know, thank you.
Phone is on.
Might as you wanna get it started? I have everybody's attention, we're about to go. Here we go. Yeah.
Kidding. All right, so we have a working lunch. The next item on our agenda is the State Advisory Group SAG Criminal Justice Committee. Oh, wait.
Can I say one thing? I again appreciate folks who will turn it over to NBC. One thing to note, I know we've had some council members coming and going. Oh my glasses, maybe I can see if anybody new has joined. I'm not sure.
We have Liz Thorne.
Oh, Liz Thorne is here. Hi, Liz. Thanks for being here. We know some additional staff have joined online too. Thank you. And also, just want to shout out, Rachel Mosier, who is the governor's advisor, is somewhere there too. Hi, Rachel, do you want to say hi?
I love to, Brian. Thank you. And good to be with you all. I'm just popping in briefly, but really excited to continue to learn more about the Youth Development Council's work as well. And again, as Brian named, my name is Rachel Moser, and I'm the Education Advisor within the Governor's Office.
Thanks, Rachel. And I see some additional guests. We appreciate your being here. And then we'll just remind that end of the meeting, we'll have time for public comment. So now back to NPC research, and yeah, I'm not sure Juliet or maybe Anna, you all take it away.
Great. Thank you all so much. I'm just going to coordinate with my colleague Lisa here to bring up our slides and make sure that is all working.
I think someone needs to allow me to share my screen.
On it, I had Anna sharing. Let's get Lisa sharing.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. It'll just take me a minute. There we go. Hey, you can try now, Lisa. Thank
There
you.
it goes. Yep. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. We are really excited to be here and to share the 2021-2023 JCP evaluation findings with you all. My name is Anna Tamarkin, and I am here with two of my colleagues from NPC Research, Juliet Mackin, who co-leads the evaluation with me, and Lisa Lucas, who is our project director and lead data analyst and slide changer today. So today we're going to be giving kind of a summary overview of our JCP evaluation findings, but I just wanted to mention that if at any time, if you're wondering, oh, sorry, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I thought I was hearing something. I just wanted to mention, if throughout this presentation or afterwards, if you're wondering about anything detailed or specific that we didn't dive into, please do feel free to ask. Lisa has all of our data tables and appendices kind of at the ready, and we can either answer questions as they come up today, or if it's something we need to look into further, we'll do that and loop back with you after this meeting. So please feel free to ask questions. Okay, we are going to start with just a little bit of background about the JCP program and the evaluation. The Juvenile Crime Prevention Program supports all 36 counties and 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon. And the goal of the JCP program is to serve young people who are at risk of engaging in criminal behavior and to prevent this criminal behavior. When youth begin receiving JCP services, they are administered the JCP assessment tool, which measures a variety of risk and protective factors in 6 different domains. And you can see those domains here on the right side of the slide. So youth are assessed for both risk and protective factors related to school and academics, behavior, family functioning and communication, substance use, peers and friendships, and thoughts and attitudes. The tool also includes a collection of mental health indicators, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation. The assessment is administered at intake when a youth begins receiving JCP services, and then again every 6 months, and those are what we call the reassessments. And we conduct an evaluation of the JCP program every 2 years, and we look at the change in risk levels and the impact on juvenile crime for those youth who are receiving services. So just a quick description of the youth who are included in this evaluation. Just to note, we had 1,621 JCP youth with initial assessments. So the slides I'm about to share describe those youth at their initial assessment. And then we had 927 youth who had both an initial and a reassessment. So those are the youth that are included in the analysis when we look at change in risk factors. About 60% of the youth were white, followed by 20% Latinx, 8% Native American, 6% multiracial, 3% Black, and 1% each for Asian and Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. So about 40% of JCP youth are from historically marginalized groups. I want to mention also that for all of the data findings that we're sharing today, we do take a close look to see if there are any patterns that emerge that suggest differences between youth based on demographic characteristics. This time around, we didn't see any strong, consistent patterns or differences in outcomes, but we will share a few significant findings a bit later. But just to reiterate, we have all of these findings broken down by subgroups and demographics. So if there's anything you're interested in knowing more about, please ask, and we can always share that with you. Okay, so on average, JCP youth were 14 years old with a range of 7 to 19 years old. About 2/3 were 13 and younger, not leading third were 14 and older. 59% were male and 39% female. We also have a recently added gender category, and 2% of youth identified as another gender. 3/4 of youth were from less populated counties. So those are counties with a population of less than 300,000. And the remaining quarter were from counties with populations greater than 300,000. So as I mentioned earlier, when youth enter JCP services, they complete that initial risk assessment. And on that assessment, there are 30 different scored risk and protective factors. So the overall score can range from 0 to 30. And depending on a youth score, they fall in one of 3 categories. So 0 to 4 risk factors is considered to be low risk. 5 to 13 is medium risk, and 14 or more risk factors is high risk. Just a note about how the protective factors are accounted for in this overall score. So for each risk factor that a youth has, they get a 1 towards their score, their overall score. If they are missing a protective factor, or essentially if that youth is lacking that protective factor, that also counts as a 1. So missing a protective factor is translated to having a risk factor. So at initial assessment, 44% of JCP youth were considered to be medium risk, and the average score was 8, indicating medium risk there as well. And just for a little context in terms of how these findings fit into kind of trends across time, we see the proportion of medium risk youth as well as the average risk score of medium to be very consistent over the last several biennia. So going back to 2015, we see that same pattern. 39% were low risk and 17% were high risk. On average, JCP youth had 6 risk factors and were missing 2 protective factors. And this is reflected in that overall average score of 8. They, on average, had risk factors in 4 different domains. And it's worth noting that to be eligible for JCP services, youth have to have risks in at least 2 domains. And we see here that they have risk across 4. So that is considerably more than the eligibility requirement. And just to give you all a sense of what we see over time for risk and protective factors, we see a lot of consistency in what are the most prevalent or the most common factors. So here on the left in the purple are the most common protective factors that we see over the last decade. And then on the right in the blue are the most common risk factors over the last decade or so. And you can see here that the influence of friends is especially prevalent and common as a risk or protective factor. We also know from our validation studies of the assessment tool that the same few risk factors consistently rise to the top in terms of their strength in predicting whether a youth will reoffend. So you can see those listed along the bottom of the slide. And really very consistently, those 2 runaway risk factors, so recent runaway and chronic runaway, are the top 2 strongest predictors. While these are strong predictors, they are also less common. So in Oregon, we see about 8% of youth that have the recent runaway risk factor, which is pretty consistent with the national percentage as well, right around 8%. In addition to the 6 domains that we talked about earlier, the JCP assessment tool also includes a set of indicators of mental health needs. And these are listed on the left side here. So if youth are actively suicidal or have made prior attempts, if they are depressed or withdrawn, have difficulty sleeping or eating, if they experience hallucinations or delusions that are not related to drug or alcohol use, and if they are socially isolated. And we find that out of all JCP youth, 46% do not have any mental health indicators, but that over half have either one or more than one mental health needs. And you can see here that the percentage of youth with more than one mental health indicator increases as risk level increases. And that over half of the youth who are considered to be high risk have more than one mental health indicator. And this is a pattern that has been consistent as well. When we look back at the evaluation data over the last decade, we see this same pattern. Okay, shifting now, we're going to share some findings related to risk and protection outcomes. So really what we're seeing in terms of change in risk level. We found that 4 out of 10 JCP youth have a reduction in their risk level between their initial assessment and their reassessment after receiving JCP services. 28% stay at the same risk level and 31% have an increased risk level. One of our key takeaway findings is that we see the greatest amount of risk reduction among the highest risk youth. So 68% of high risk youth have a reduction in their risk level at reassessment. And this is compared to 48% of medium risk youth and 21% of low risk youth. And this is also a consistent finding across time, kind of ranging from 2/3 to 3/4 of high risk youth show a reduction in their risk level. And it's interesting to note because, of course, youth who are high risk, they have more risk factors, they kind of have more room to change and more room to reduce. But we do see that of high risk youth who do reduce their risk level, 54% of them kind of shift over to the medium risk category, and 21% of them move to low risk. So a quarter of them stay in the high risk category, even though they've reduced their risk, but around 75% have actually hopped into a lower risk level. So they had more room to reduce, and they did. We see that JCP youth have significant increases in their protective factors. So these are essentially the factors that can buffer against risk factors. These are the top 5 increases in protective factors. 30% increase in youth who have friends who disapprove of unlawful behavior, and in youth who have friends who are academic achievers. We see increases in youth who communicate effectively with their family members and who have significant school attachment or commitment. And then finally, over half of youth gain the protective factor of having an adult in their lives that they can talk to. We also see significant reductions in risk among JCP youth. At reassessment, 70% of youth who at their initial assessment had engaged in behavior that hurt others or put others in danger during the past month no longer have this risk factor. And we see similarly impressive reductions in risk for runaway, school dropout, aggressive or disruptive behavior at school, and problematic substance use. And just to spotlight the improvements that we see related to school and academics, 39% of JCP youth gained the protective factor of being attached or committed to school. And we see a 62% reduction in school dropout, 48% reduction in chronic truancy, and a 44% reduction in academic failure. Okay. We are going to now turn to the outcomes that we see related to juvenile crime prevention. We found that most JCP youth had no criminal involvement or detention in the 12 months after they started JCP services. So 78% had no criminal referrals and 85% did not have detention. We look at both youth who had criminal involvement before they started JCP and youth who did not have any criminal involvement. And we find that both groups continue to avoid criminal involvement after JCP for up to 3 years. So 2/3 of youth who did not have any criminal involvement before they started receiving JCP services continued to not have any criminal involvement for up to 3 years. And 39% of youth who did have criminal involvement before JCP did not have any further criminal involvement, so no recidivism after 3 years. Similarly, both youth who had criminal involvement before JCP and those who did not avoided detention up to 3 years after starting to receive JCP services. 86% of youth with no criminal behavior before avoided detention, and 45% of youth with criminal behavior before JCP had no detention after 36 months. This slide shows the criminal involvement of youth in the 12 months after starting JCP services and then breaks it down by risk level. So the risk level measured at their initial assessment. And you can see here on the left that 78% of all youth, regardless of their risk level, have no criminal involvement in the 12 months after JCP. And you can see that the proportion who don't have any criminal involvement goes down as risk level goes up. And then moving over to the right, we see that high-risk youth represent the greatest proportion of youth who have one or more criminal referrals. And then finally, the set of bars on the far right-hand side show that, again, high-risk youth represent the greatest proportion of youth who have detention in the 12 months after starting GCP services. And this slide shows an important outcome. So most JCP youth do avoid criminal involvement after JCP. And we find that the rates of criminal involvement are much less than we would expect based on risk levels. So on this slide, the purple bars here represent the percentage of low risk, medium risk, and high risk youth who have criminal involvement in the first 12 months after JCP. And then the blue line represents the percentage we would expect to have criminal involvement. And this is based on what we found when we conducted a validation study of the assessment tool. And we looked at the probability of reoffending based on risk level. So you can see here that for low risk youth, for example, we would expect that 25% of them would reoffend. But in this group of JCP youth, only 10% of them actually do. And for medium risk youth, we see only 25% compared to 50%. And for high risk youth, we see only 39% compared to 75%. As I did mention earlier, we examine all outcomes by youth characteristics, and we thought we'd share just a few of these that did emerge. But again, please ask if you're interested in seeing kind of the full set of subgroup analyses. We do see a few differences in outcomes by race. Native, Latinx, and Asian youth had significantly less criminal involvement than all other racial groups. And white youth had significantly less criminal involvement than Black and multiracial youth. Females had less criminal involvement than males, and younger youth had less detention than older youth. And youth from less populated counties and youth from tribes had less criminal involvement than youth from more populated counties. Okay, so just wrapping up here, we have a few highlights from these evaluation findings and a few recommendations. So 3 major takeaways that we really see emerging from these data. First, youth who participate in the JCP program do avoid criminal recidivism, especially youth who are considered to be high risk at their initial assessment. Further, we see the greatest risk reduction among high risk youth. And finally, we see considerable impact in the school domain. So youth who participate in JCP tend to re-engage in education programs. We see reductions in things like dropout and truancy and an increase in school attachment. In terms of recommendations based on these key takeaways, first, focusing on services for high-risk youth is important as we see quite a bit of impact for those youth. And second, we feel it would be worthwhile to expand the scope of the evaluation to really look more closely at differences in those individual risk and protective factors. So really looking closely at whether there are certain risk and protective factors that are more or less likely to change. And learning from JCP providers about their insights on this. along the same lines, gathering more information from providers about the services that JCP youth are receiving. We see these positive outcomes for risk reduction and juvenile crime prevention, but we know less about what the services actually look like for youth. So collecting data about eligibility and dosage, program type, would really add some context and richness to these findings. And then finally, because we do see some differences among different groups of youth, it's important to explore the impact of culturally specific and culturally responsive services. And that's it. Thank you for being here and listening. And if anyone has any questions or feedback, we are more than happy to hang out and discuss. And you are also always welcome to get in touch with us later at your convenience. But thank you so much. And we'd just like to open it up for any questions or comments at this time.
Hi, Christina McMahon, Clackamas County Juvenile Department. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
That recommendation slide, if we could maybe go back to that. I just want to point out one of the recommendations focusing on high-risk youth. In my experience, when I look at high-risk youth, often that group of chronic, we refer to them as chronic offenders, the youth that are very busy and get a lot of referrals to the juvenile justice system. They typically fall in that category of high risk just because they have so much engagement with the system. When you look at over the years, when I've looked at that, the data on that group, those high risk kids, and this is a general statement, typically they have a much larger history of being referred to the juvenile department, whether that was from being a runaway. We see that a lot. Being a runaway, you know, because you did a validation study in Clackamas County, so you know about runaways big, has a lot of weight in terms of risk for us. But anyway, when you look at their histories, they have all these things that happened early on. They tend to be younger when they start in their juvenile justice involvement, and they have more referrals. They have lower level stuff like curfew and runaway and minor in possession, et cetera. So one of the concerns that I have is in my career watching funding for prevention services, really, there's not much left anymore compared to what it used to be like. So I always get worried. We absolutely do need to focus on the high-risk youth, but typically the high-risk youth didn't start out as high-risk youth. They started out as low-risk youth and their needs were not addressed. Nobody had the resources or for whatever reason, they didn't get the services when the problem was this big.
Yeah.
And then they land on our doorstep, and every county has its own way of dealing with those. Some counties send warning letters and don't do any services initially, and they have some kind of a threshold for that. Other counties are engaging the minute they get a referral. It just depends. But I do know that in my position with the Oregon Juvenile Department Directors Association and listening to the concerns of the juvenile directors around the state, one of the concerns is we don't have the funding to do that prevention work. So I'm in a weird spot. I'm not disagreeing with that we need to focus on high-risk youth. To me, it's really about the service matching. Low-risk kids still need services. And if we don't get them those services, then they end up gradually escalating in their risk and become those high-risk youth that use the most expensive, deeper end services in the juvenile justice system. So I don't hear you saying, don't worry about the low-risk kids, but I just wanted to make this point in this group from a policy and resource advocacy standpoint, why I really believe it's important to deal with kids where they're at when we get those referrals and hopefully keep them and their families from having to be called to work. Anyway, just an observation. Then I had a quick question. The multiracial, you had some data on multiracial youth, and that made me wonder, of all these young people, I think you said it was close to 1,100 that were part of the group for JCP services. How many of that number is the assessment data coming from the data manager system, which is outside of our juvenile justice information system? Juvenile departments use JGIS, and we know that we don't have the ability in JGIS currently to gather the information on multiracial. So I'm just curious if you can maybe explain that a little bit, because our experience is you were talking about the Asian, Native American, Latino youth being having a lower percentage. Our experience is those groups are underreported because of our inability to capture multiracial data in JGIS. So that's something we're working on, by the way, everybody. We've been working on this for years. We're going to continue to work on it. But that was another question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And Lisa, I think I might turn that over to you to talk a little bit about how we, the proportion of assessments from data manager versus JGIS, and then also kind of how we calculate or, come up with those race categories.
And in the meantime, I can also mention that because the JCP assessment gathers race as a check all that apply, so youth can select as many categories as they identify with racially, ethnically, culturally. We have that information for both our JGIS youth and our data manager youth because it's part of the assessment process. So at least we do have that information and the ability to look at youth who pick more than one category, as well as look at what are those different identities that make up the multiracial grouping for both groups of kids.
And we do have more than half are from the data managers. So you're right, Christine, that we have more information on a larger number of the youth than we have from JGIS. But as Juliet said, they are able to check all that apply. So we created the multiracial category based on more than one race being checked off by the assessor.
San Drew, I have a question also that I think is somewhat related to what Christina is saying. When you look at the recidivism data and the fact that for the high-risk kids, it looks like there's a 15% jump in recidivism at the 2-year point, the 3-year mark. I was wondering which protective factors are weakening, or which risk factors are escalating that are contributing to that? Are those kids still being tracked at that point to even know about how those factors are changing? What can we do to prevent that jump in recidivism for those high-risk kids, keep them connected? And I was wondering if we had any racial and ethnic disparity data for that, for those that are recidivating, so that we can figure out what we can do better.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly, but so for the jump in the 3-year, one thing that we've started doing recently is we're able to include data that far out. And Juliet, you might know the answer to this better, but because some of the youth are then kind of aging into the adult system, they're not necessarily still receiving JCP services.
Yes, I was going to say that too, that most of the youth are no longer in service. So the first period of time, it really varies a lot across the state, depending on what kinds of JCP service youth are engaged with, how long they're staying connected into service. But most of the youth by the 2nd and 3rd year are not engaged anymore. And so those are part of that support is then either transitioned to other resources or maybe lacking. And so I think that is one of the things that we did see. I'm not sure we have looked at it this year. This is something that Lisa might know, but in prior years, one of the things that we did find when we looked at the programs that did keep youth engaged for multiple years is they did have lower recidivism. And so it does, I mean, it's not surprising that that kind of support would help keep youth connected into a positive path. So that's definitely something to pay attention to.
Thank you.
And I'll just add that the recommendation about the service provision and dosage was based on the fact that it's very hard for us to say if kids are how much service kids have received. And so so we didn't do that this year, where we looked at like what's happening, because I didn't feel confident with the data that we had for how kids who were in or out and how long they were in. So, but we'd like to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, yeah, Jeff Parker here real quickly. Thank you. Two things. One, I'll be honest, I get lost in averages. It kind of dilutes the high and the low. And so what I'm really most interested in is change over time. And so I don't know how many times we've done this research, and what we're really trying to figure out is efficacy of intervention, where we want to put limited resources. So if this is the first time we've done this study, then I hope we can do it multiple times. That change over time and disaggregate in different ways across gender, region, ethnicity. And then I want to make sure I heard this right, because it gave me a little bit of heartburn, but one of the slides said white youth have lower criminal involvement, which I don't think we can say from this data. We can say that they have lower involvement with the juvenile justice system. And so I saw that in there, that caused me pause. I want to make sure if this is a public document that requesting that we kind of change that nomenclature around. Not kind of, that we do change the language.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we can absolutely make that change in the language. And just to touch on, we do this evaluation analysis every 2 years. So we do have a lot of data going back. And we do disaggregate all of our analyses by subgroups. So that is information we have, and be happy to share more of that.
Did you have a question? Yeah, Pamela, I am new to this report, so I just wanted to double check I understood. Are these self-report? Is this data from self-reports from the youth, or case like managers or caseworkers that are working with them? Is question number one. And question number two is, one of the slides, like the most positive factor is having an adult in their life that they can talk to. So I'm wondering, for these adults that they've gained, is it somebody who's already in their network, or is it a counselor, or is it a teacher? I just wasn't sure kind of where these adults came from that made such a huge change. I think one of the slides said like 55% change.
One of the things in terms of the source of data, the JCP assessment is conducted by a staff member. So that might be a juvenile department staff member. It might be a program staff member in the community, depends on the JCP service, but typically it's someone in a staff role. They are usually interviewing or having conversations with the youth and in many cases, family members, caregivers, or parental figures. So they're gathering information. If they are able to, they gather information from other sources too, such as schools or other service providers that the youth may have had contact with. So the staff members gathering information from the youth's self-report and the family report and other records that they might have, and particularly in the juvenile system, the juvenile justice system, they have access to JJUS, they have access to some school records. So it depends a lot, but some of that is self-reported, but it's all coming through a staff member's professional judgment and compilation of multiple sources of information for the JCP assessment. So that's the information at intake and the information for the reassessments. The information about juvenile justice involvement and the kinds of contacts that they're having with systems and the types of allegations that they're that they're facing, that comes directly through archival records. So that's coming from the juvenile justice information system from their record. So that's not self-reported. Now I've lost track of this. Oh, the important people in their lives. So that we do not actually gather information about who the person is. So we can't consistently say we know that. We know from talking with staff members and from having had conversations with people over the years, and those folks who are also have their own staff that do these assessments might have more information as well. But what we tend to see is that early on, sometimes the youth are saying, the person that I'm involved with in these JCP services is someone I can now talk to. Like that support becomes part of that change process. And the goal is always to develop a network within their natural environment. So natural supports, other adults, trying to connect them in. So part of the training and process around JCP assessment and service is to have this information from the JCP assessment be part of service planning, case planning. So if they are missing that person, the intention is that that's a crucial area of foundation to build on, to make sure that this youth has other positive adults to support them. But we cannot verify that that's actually like who those people are. That would be a wonderful addition to the evaluation. I think if we could do as Anna was saying and try to expand a little bit how we gather information from the partners and providers, that would be really interesting to know.
Just, this is Kim Lay again, just a follow-up comment. I think that's exactly when I used to work inside of a juvenile detention center. Many of the youth that I interacted with, they told me, this is my family. I actually don't want to leave because these are the adults that I can trust on. These are the adults that have unpredictable behavior or, attitude towards me. And those individuals are the ones who are supporting me. And so I was hoping to gauge, are they finding support, supporting adults outside of the system? Or otherwise, we're going to have them coming back looking for the support within the system.
We're a little short on time. Julia, Anna, Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. If we could have really, really quick committee updates, and then we'll turn it over for public comment. If we could start with the Juvenile Justice Committee. Do you have an update?
I'm going to give a quick update. This is Molly Rogers, and I'm the chair of the Juvenile Justice Committee, which we just took the last 45 minutes of your time with what's really exciting to us, which is our major investments through the biennium. But also you heard from Lawrence earlier about the RFAs being out. The third thing is really, we just got back from CJJ, which is Coalition of Juvenile Justice, where Maricela represented us as the state of Oregon and did a great job. And I would recommend maybe our next meeting setting aside a little bit of time to talk about that experience. And then the final thing is anybody can join our subcommittee, and we meet once a month. We're a very active, engaged, and fun subcommittee. And so always looking for new volunteers. And really, we dove into the data a little bit more with MPC. To really answer some of those questions. So I think definitely if you're interested in that report, come to our meetings so that we can have more kind of dialogue around that. So that's my update. I have to hop off at 1 for another meeting.
Thanks, Molly.
Thanks, Molly.
Policy, Rules, and Research Committee.
Sorry, I wonder if my committee chairs want to speak on that, but I can also just note that the strategic planning work group met jointly with the committee at our last work group meeting.
Abe, could you give us an update for the youth committee?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick update. We just met recently, I think it was last week. We did a little review of kind of the work that we've done up to now, till now in regards to developing and just trying to recruit more youth members. And currently, I think we have 2, I believe, if that's correct. I believe that we're waiting for them to kind of get processed through the appointment process. So that's a good thing. I think we may have a 3rd, if I recall correctly. But that's kind of where we're at. We had a meeting, discussed kind of possible kind of future meeting where perhaps the youth would actually facilitate kind of a meeting, something where they would actually be able to get to know the council members, some sort of relationship building process. It's still kind of fuzzy. We still need to meet and discuss it tomorrow, but that's kind of where we're at. And also just gave a kind of a formal thank you to one of our youth committee members, Andy May Santana, as well. I just recognized him and all the work that he's been doing with the youth committee, as that would have been his last meeting as a member of the youth committee.
Thank you. Our last committee is the equity and diversity.
Yeah, good evening, Jeff Parker, acting as the interim chair of that committee. We had a meeting on June 3rd, and I just want to express my gratitude to Lawrence for presenting a lot of the racial and ethnic disparity data, and then facilitating a brief conversation. We would have loved to have had a bigger conversation. We sort of ran out of time. And then a little bit of work to do from that in terms of looking at how that intersects with some of the interventions that we've done and disaggregating some of that data. I do want to say that this committee in the last year has done a lot of work from putting together the equity lens. I say the committee with staff led, we supported the equity lens, land acknowledgement, a lot of those things. And like a lot of processes, there can be sort of a deflation after that. We've had really poor attendance. We've had to reschedule meetings. We've had to cancel meetings. And I don't think it's just that can naturally happen, right? After a heavy lift for a committee, then everyone just wants to breathe. And so I would shamelessly ask people to join the committee, shamelessly ask committee members to attend the meetings, or say, maybe it goes dormant for a little while we do the RFA stuff and the strategic plan. Like maybe there's just too many things happening. Certainly this council needs to have this committee, but it might just need to sit on the sideline for a little bit and then come back with a strategic plan. So I'm open to all of that. I am a reluctant interim chair. So there's the report. Please join us, or let's have a conversation around maybe we just not sunset it, but just put it on the side. Pause. Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. And then do we have anyone kind of?
I do not. I'll just check with Joy to see if she's heard from anyone, but I haven't.
Melissa, there's no public comments at this time.
Thanks, Joy. Our last item, YDO update, meeting round.
Leave it, it's 5 till, but that happens so quickly. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, it's been a busy period in this last quarter. We've heard we've been overwhelm you with too much information about between the convenings, recruitment that's happening. Our prevention and justice team was managing through an audit from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Implementation. The Title II RFA going out, Coalition for Juvenile Justice Conference, and whole day that number of folks to be, Maricela, Molly, and members of staff were all there and present, and just other things around the state, education cluster meeting and grantee insight visits and grantee reporting all happening. So Jeff, appreciate your suggestion that, you know, as we look at the summer and fall, there may be some things that, you know, we want to focus in on the RFA work group, keep the strategic planning efforts going. I know that our juvenile justice committee is also going to get ramping up on a 30-day detention piece and lots of other detention guidelines. So there's plenty of work. We'll think about how we can not overwhelm anybody. But just from this meeting, I'll say some things that I captured. There was a desire to kind of suggestion around kind of creating a map of systems that the youth and families that our work is engaging. So we'll think about what that, how to give you some visual information. Know that, as you might imagine, we're pretty engaged with the system of care and its coordinating council and juvenile justice and foster care conversations as well. And so many our youth obviously are touching those systems, but perhaps there's ways with the youth data that we have, we can think about how to continue to tell that story. So I heard that request. Also our role as a kind of convener and gathering of work, people and organizations around communities of practice and technical assistance. So I think we have a really good credibility around some of our community-based partners. So how we continue to bring folks together, not just the community-based partners, but our system partners, as they're meeting the needs of teens and older youth. So we'll think more about that. The RFA work group, specific ask for those to join that. So an email to come. And if you're not able, given summer plans and organizational plans or whatever, feel free to suggest somebody. That a work group can involve obviously council members and staff, but other partners, stakeholders, and others can be part of those. So the strategic plan work group has some other folks, who are in those meetings, just kind of from the outside, helping us ask questions and help us create some new ideas. So if you can't do the RFA work group, we'd certainly appreciate if you or somebody from your team or coworker could be a part of that and represent your agency or organization. That's always an option. And then her too, as we were talking about the strategic plan, about the kind of system and policy transformation and alignment and strengthening language and strengthening kind of our strategy there, given that there are lots of different policy level conversations happening, and sometimes we're invited and sometimes we're not, or we've got people who are around the table who are in those conversations, but we want to make sure that as an agency and as a council, we're really well represented. So we'll make sure to keep that idea top of mind, figure out how to better elevate that in the plan, either through strategy or just even the language itself. All of those things, those are kind of my main takeaways and roundup for today's meeting. Again, just appreciate everybody driving down, those showing up online, or maybe drove down or across, or I'm not sure, whatever direction you came from. Our next meeting is September. I believe Melissa will be in Salem at the Public Services Building.
We were looking at the Portland area, maybe Gresham.
Oh, maybe, sorry, another location. So more to come. We're also thinking about this is at the end of the agenda, we should have this, but there, it's on the front, look at that. November, we do, as in our kind of statutes, bylaws, more bylaws, not statutes, bylaws have they usually like a fifth meeting, and I know we had a conversation about it. We need to think about coming together as a group and give the idea from the youth committee about a youth-led meeting. Thinking about late November kind of retreat / meeting that could be, again, youth-led, and then come to a meeting end of the year in December, where we'll obviously bring some of the RFA process to be approved, and I'm sure a few other topics. So there you go. Thank you, everybody. Maricela.
Thank you all for your time today, and with that, I'll adjourn for meeting.
Yeah.